awesome. We were excited to have such a great turnout. I'm going to give just the brief introduction, walk you through what the day's program looks like. We're kind of a small group. We've done this show for 200 people. Hard to be interactive in that environment. It's meant to be interactive. It's for you. So if you don't like this program, holler and we'll do something different. I have a fiendishly over-complex color coding scheme to explain the day. We start with green stuff, which is introductory material. I'll do the literal introduction, and then Michael from Imagination and Court from Google will talk about, in a more technical way, about why Vulkan is interesting and why you might want to use it, how you might think about it. We move then to the orange stuff, which is about things you really need to know if you're going to start working with Vulkan and be productive with it. Turns out most of that stuff is about tools. If you jump into Vulkan armed with nothing but Emacs and a bright smile, and maybe GDB or DevStudio, it's going to be a painful experience. Vulkan has sharp edges. It's a complex API. You need tooling to help you be able to code without going nuts. And so fortunately, we have those tools. And the guys from LunarG will talk about the layer system. Marcus will talk about using Vulkan from C++, using the system that he's developed. John Kucinich, who's the author of the SPIRV spec, will talk about the critical topic of how do you write shaders for Vulkan and get them working. We do have breaks and we have lunch. By the way, it's all for you, and I know lots of you guys know each other, that's obvious, and us committee members know each other, but let's try to interact, because we don't get that many opportunities to all get together. So, lunch, oh, by the way, note also the URL, all of our slides live there. You don't have to write it down, just go to khronos.org and look for developer stuff about Vulkan. I don't like that. Having an audio problem? Thank you. Oh, much better. And then after lunch, Carl will talk about the Vulkan tutorial. That's the end of the orange stuff. We move into advanced topics, which is blue. Tobias will talk in the abstract about synchronization. With Vulkan, maybe you knew this, you probably did. Anytime you give the GPU two commands, you've created a race condition unless you do something to explicitly say it's not a race condition. And so living in that environment requires a different way of thinking, unless you're a console guy and you're used to it. But Tobias will talk about how to think about that. And then in the later afternoon, we have two case studies of people trying to do large, complex, interesting things using Vulkan. At the end of the day, during the last break, we bring in beer and snacks, and we're going to go, well, I should say, we'll take questions as we can. As usual, we have slightly more material than we should for the amount of time we have, so it may be a problem to take Q&A from the floor. Grab people. It's, you know, we're not scary, and you're not scared, so just during the breaks, during lunch, ask people questions. Again, we will take questions as we can, but also save the really gnarly ones for the Q&A. We have an hour, and we'll continue till the beer runs out. At the very end, our distinguished president, Neil Trevitt, also a VP at NVIDIA, will talk about Khronos in general. We have ways for you to get more involved if this sort of interaction isn't enough, and he'll talk about that. So I'm the guy who does the introduction. Hi, my name's Tom. Yes, hi, Michael. Who are we? We're the Vulkan Working Group. So we are variously anywhere from, depending on the meeting, 30 to 70 people who've spent the last 2 to some of us as much as 5 years bringing this new thing into the world and thinking about the reasons for it and engineering it and designing it and fighting about it. We don't work for Khronos. We work for the member companies. This is a partial list of the people who are members of Vulkan. Khronos itself has 120-odd companies. But these are most of the currently active Vulkan members. Our companies pay Khronos a modest fee every year to be able to send us to work on this standard. And they do that because in some fashion, real-time graphics and an ecosystem and an economy built on real-time graphics is important to them. So we have guys like Epic and Valve who sell content that runs on real-time graphics. We have companies like NVIDIA that make GPUs that deliver real-time graphics. In between, we have consumer equipment makers. We have platform people like Google and Red Hat who want to, who depend on, for their value, lots of people wanting to use this platform to do stuff, and software guys wanting to sell software that runs on it. So that's why we're all in the room. We all bring our own prejudices, our own perspectives on what's important, and by rubbing those together, we end up with something that's better than any of us could have done entirely on our own. It is, by the way, a new and awesome thing for us. Most of us came to Vulkan from the OpenGL committee, to have so many game developers in the Vulkan committee. If you'll see many familiar logos there. And we also talk to people outside, and happy to talk to you too. And that is making us much stronger than we used to be. So we're the Vulkan Working Group. We do most of our work on the telephone, as you would think. We spend 3 hours a week in teleconferences, plus a lot of time on using internet tools to communicate with each other. Every so often, we find it important to get in each other's faces, and because you can only fight so angrily on the phone, sometimes you have to get face to face. So when we get together, this is kind of what we look like. This is actually our class picture from last January's week-long face-to-face meeting in Seattle. This past week, we came here, and so we have been in Vancouver for 9 days or so, and spent 4 days last week having a fight about what comes next in Vulkan. We didn't get a class picture because we couldn't keep people out of the bars long enough. But some of us are here. There's me, there's Michael, who'll be speaking after me, and Alon later, Tobias, and John, and there are some other guys in the room who were not there in Seattle, so I don't have their pictures. So that's who we are. Who's Vulkan? You know this mostly. At least technically, I'm sure you know what Vulkan is. Spiritually, I'm not that technical a guy. Spiritually, what Vulkan aspires to be is what OpenGL was for the past 20 years, which is the de facto standard cross-platform API for doing real-time graphics, beautiful graphics, all kinds of graphics. So Vulkan is, for the next 20 years, and solving many of the problems, we hope, of OpenGL. It's been out for almost a year. It's going to be February 16th, I think, was the release date. The rollout and availability is a work in progress. It's doing pretty well. The Valve guys tell us, for example, that they think 50% of the desktop platforms they care about are Vulkan capable. They've got a Vulkan capable GPU, and they're running on a Vulkan ready OS. So we're getting there. 50% of the market is still, for a business person, oh, you'd like to do better than that. And you will. And then, of course, in the mobile space, with Vulkan officially exposable in Android 7, we're expecting it to come on very quickly. I don't want to belabor the point and go back too far into the dark past. You know why we had to do this, right? We're all OpenGL guys. I loved OpenGL, but it had problems that we couldn't fix by adding more extensions. It was time to start over. The problem fundamentally came down to the programming model of the old APIs, DX11 and OpenGL, didn't match the way the hardware worked. It wasn't even close. And so what that meant was the gaps had to be filled in with driver magic. The driver magic is CPU intensive, that's bad, but worse, it's different driver magic in every damn driver. And if you're trying to make a real-time application and the driver's trying to guess what you're doing because it doesn't know, and different drivers are guessing different, you go crazy trying to trick the driver into doing what you want it to do. So the big thing about, the biggest problem we had to solve was that. And then there was, of course, the nasty thing that we're all, a cheap CPU these days has 4 cores, and you could only use one of them for rendering. That was pretty bad, too. And, yeah, other problems. I'm going to claim without proof we've solved these, and happy to argue that with you later on. One more quick thing that we're trying to change to be different. We tried with OpenGL, but we're not always successful in being responsive to the community. We tended to go off and huddle in our little room and deliver a new spec every year. We're trying to do things differently now. There are limits to how open and transparent we can be because we are trying to keep trolls off of the graphics space, and that involves a certain amount of secrecy. But we're being as open as we can and as responsive as we can. All of our resources, including the specification itself, are available on GitHub. If you find something confusing or wrong in the spec, you can open an issue. Very soon you'll be able to make a pull request, but you can't quite do it yet because the license on the spec, again, has patent language around it. All of our software, all of the tools you're going to hear about today are also in open source under Apache 2. You can work on them yourself. You can internalize them, do anything you want with them. And charge money for your version of them, etc. It's all good. The other thing we do, the working group, I said we meet 3 hours a week. 50% of that time is devoted to trying to respond to input we get from the outside. So I encourage you to go look at Khronos Group. Vulkan Docs is the name of the spec project. There's, all of the tools are there as well. Michael, are you about ready? So I'm going to sit down quick. Michael Worcester from Imagination is going to jump up and give a more technical view.